So we now move on to item 5, and I'd ask Brent and David to come. Oh, you've got 3 of you. So far away, introduce and far away, please.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. For those who don't know me, my name's Brent Pizzi. I'm one of the authors of the report. To my right is Keegan Clutterbuck, who was also one of the authors. He is or was contract manager, is that correct?
Contract and project lead for the resource recovery team.
And to the far right is Dr. Steve Pearce. Dr. Pearce is a director at PDP Consultancy, who the council has been relying on for independent assessment of the odour being generated from the organics processing plant. We have prepared, Mayor, a very short summary of the council report. And I would like to highlight, before running through this in detail, that there isn't a great deal of dispute between council staff or the content of this report and what you've heard from the deputations this morning. It's precisely because of the concerns and the impacts that the organics processing plant's offensive and objectionable odour has been having at times that the council decided last year that it preferred shifting it. And the decision recommended in this report is about what to do until the council can shift it. And that period is until roughly 2027, 2029. The staff recommendation in the report is not to continue operating at the site with the current controls in place. The staff recommendation is to engage with the community and do something quite different. We've had an opportunity to see some amendments to those resolutions that I understand you're going to propose, Mayor, with the Deputy Mayor, and have no issues with those. So just to recap the context, how we got here to having this report and this decision for you to make today. The organics processing plant processes roughly 55,000 tonnes of kerbside organics collected across the city each year. It composts it at the OPP site, and it also composts organic waste brought to that site from the Waimakariri District Council. And it does so in, under a resource consent for discharges to air that ECAN has issued to this council. So that's a resource consent to discharge odour to air. But there's a condition that some of the deputations have highlighted, that that odour shall not be offensive and objectionable beyond the boundary of the site. Now, it was precisely because of the issues that the deputations have spoken about today that the council resolved last year in April and May that it agreed in principle to the relocation of the organics processing plant to another site. And the council's been going through a very detailed process to procure opportunities to do that. And that's why I've mentioned an interim period until 2027, 2029, because it's going to take some time for that alternative to be first chosen by the council later this year and then become operational. So when the council decided last year that it agreed in principle to the relocation of the organics processing plant to another site, it also resolved to continue composting at the current site with current controls until that new facility or redevelopment of the current one is operational. Now, those current controls haven't always worked. There's no dispute about that. There have been offensive and objectionable odours beyond the boundary of the site. And I'd like to refer you to the report. Give me a moment. Paragraphs 4.12 to 4.14 of the staff report. Environment Canterbury enforcement officers have assessed offensive and objectionable odours beyond the boundary in December, January and through to March of this year. And also this council has engaged Dr. Pearce and his colleagues at PDP to do their own independent monitoring. So this council's proactive monitoring has identified that there has been offensive and objectionable odour beyond the boundary. On further dates that hadn't already been identified by Environment Canterbury, and they were in February, April, and the most recent 13th of May this year. So it's precisely because of those issues and the impact that they're having on the community that this council in late March requested Keegan and his colleagues to investigate any options to get off the site sooner than that 2027-2029 date that the council resolved on last year. And since then, in those 2 months, staff have been doing everything they can to find alternatives and recommend them back to you. And that's what this report does. It does identify options to get off the site sooner than 2027-2029, and it proposes a way to do that. Just turning to some of the detail of that investigation in the report. The waste management team looked at options all around the country. Appendix A to the report has a map attached that shows something like 20 different sites around the country where there's composting or worm farms or anaerobic digestion or landfills that the team has investigated as options if the council was to close the site, because to state the obvious, if the waste is to go somewhere if the council closes the site, where are the organics going to go to? That needs to be sorted out before the council can close the site. So the team has looked at all those options around the country, and I think it was Appendix B to the report is a long list of the type of processing opportunities that the team have investigated. And then option C, a short list of those. Bottom line, the options are to find an alternative composter or worm farm or community initiatives. In other words, continue processing the green waste or dispose of it to landfill, or some combination of those, or, and the council can't predetermine its decision making here, stay at the current site with more significant improvements. So they're the options that the report recommends the council engage with its communities on. Just talking about those in a little bit more detail, and this is summarising the content of the report. The team hasn't identified any composters anywhere in the country. We currently have both physical capacity and approvals under the RMA to take all of the curbside organics for composting right now. There are 3 operators in the North Island and none who have been identified in the South Island who are able to take part of the mixed curbside organics. And those 3 in the North Island are mentioned on this slide. Ecogas can take some, Envirofert can take some, and a worm farm can take some. So that would mean shipping that to the North Island. But it's not dealing with all of the 55,000 tonnes approximately that the council generates each year from its curbside organics. So if the council was to use those operators, it would need to decide what is it going to do with the rest. Is it going to dispose of it at Cape Valley landfill, continue to process some of it at the OPP or something else? There are resource consent delays, as some of the deputations have highlighted, in getting resource consent and variations to resource consents, they need to be in place before any alternative operators can accept the council's waste. As a preliminary, very much a preliminary recommendation from council staff, because as you know, there's been no engagement with the community on this yet, staff aren't too keen on sending the kerbside organics to non-local composters, and by that I mean in the North Island. And that's because of costs, both financial and environmental. Okay, option 2 to engage with the community on is disposal at Cape Valley landfill. The waste management team have investigated, as I said before, landfills all around the country, and the Cape Valley one is the only one who have said that they have capacity to accept the council's kerbside organics in their landfill, but don't have resource consent in place yet to be able to take all of it. On their very rough estimates on the current consent conditions to do with truck movements, they might be able to take the equivalent of 12 to 18,000 tonnes of the council's kerbside organics at this stage. And they'd need a variation of their resource consent if they were to take it all. And just there is a resource consent to accept truck movements at Cape Valley. That might have started off as being an intent for it to be by rail, but the current resource consent authorises truck movements. So the council will have a decision to make about what to do if it does prefer disposal at Cape Valley, what to do until Cape Valley might have a resource consent in place to accept all of the kerbside organics. Is it to continue processing part at the organics processing plant or send some to another composter in the North Island? Option 3 for engagement with the community is the possibility of continuing at the current site, but with much more extensive changes than were embodied in the council resolution from last year. Dr. Pearce and his team have identified that the key issue with generating odour, which is offensive and objectionable beyond the boundary of the site on occasion, is that of outdoor storage. It's because the material is being stored outside that there is that increased risk of offensive and objectionable odour. So there are some options that the waste management team would very much like to further engage with the operator of the organics processing plant on, that could potentially lead to no or very significantly reduced outdoor storage. And those options are threefold. First one is that the operator runs a second screen. Without getting into technical detail, which is way over my head, that means that the process doesn't have a delay that requires storage outside before screening is done. A second possibility is to set some sort of ideal quantity for the amount of kerbside organics that's accepted at the plant. And that ideal quantity would be worked out on the basis that it means that the plant can achieve its optimal level of maturation of the compost, which achieves a much reduced risk of odour generation, and also means that there wouldn't be any storage outside. And a third potential option for, again, significant changes at the current site is that it doesn't do the whole composting process that it does at the moment. If it was possible for the current site to do a first stage which is only involving indoor operation, and then the second stage to be managed by the council, bringing trucks to the current site, filling them up inside an enclosed building, trucking the waste, the kerbside organics, to another composter somewhere else where they finish that process. It's possible that that could mean that there's no outdoor storage. So they are three potential options, but at this stage the council's experts and waste management team haven't got sufficient comfort that they can be implemented to recommend them to you. So the staff preference is that you not decide on preferring any of those now, if that was to be your preference, that you allow some more time to ensure that there is comfort that it would have the required outcome. There's been some questions about the need to get community views before making a decision today.
You asked the question.
And I'd like to briefly summarise the staff recommendation to you about the need to get those community views. First of all, simply general principles of local government requires decision making to have regard to the views of communities. Secondly, we don't know yet what mana whenua think. Engagement with them starts after the council decides to engage with the community and find out what people think. Thirdly, the operation at the current plant is part of the council's waste management system, which is identified as being a strategic asset in the council's own planning documents, and a level of service for it that this council has identified in its long-term plan is that kerbside organics be processed at the organics processing plant. So doing something else is a significant change to that level of service. Fourth, costs. Fifth, because of the council's policies and strategies to do with climate resilience, waste management and emissions targets. And lastly, because it's our advice to you that this is a significant decision and it's appropriate for councils to know what their communities think before making significant decisions. So the staff recommendation on the decision-making route from here, and this also reflects the further resolutions that the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor are going to propose to you. In the immediate period in June, what's left of June and July, the waste management team and its consultants will be doing everything they can to find out whether there are any other operators or existing operators who can propose solutions to help meet the council's aims to get off the site. Secondly, further detailed investigation by the team of those possible options, including the concerns that I was expressing a moment ago over whether there can be sufficient assurance that continued operation at the current site with big changes would ensure that there's no offensive and objectionable odour. Next, exploring and reporting back to you on the use of some of the compost from the organics processing plant at the wastewater treatment plant that is accentuating and making worse the odour problems. So is there another way of dealing with that compost rather than using it at the wastewater treatment plant? Next, and this has been requested by some elected members, investigating alternative relief for households. So that might be looking at any rates implications or any other alternative relief that might be possible and reporting back to you on that. And next, and not least, preparing the consultation document. And that's a consultation document that will recognise the impact that the odour is having on the community that you heard about this morning. And after doing all that work, report back to the council. I believe you've got a council meeting on the 2nd of August, reporting back on the immediate steps that are possible. And also making a recommendation in relation to the resolution that the council made that I referred to at the start of this summary, making a recommendation to revoke the 2022 resolutions to continue at the current site. Okay, so after receiving that report on the 2nd of August, the council will be engaging in learning community and mana whenua views on the options that I've described to you. That may require, I don't think this has been resolved yet, but that may require a hearing to hear what some of the people who have expressed views think about it. And having a staff report come back to you in December. And it's in December that the council would be deciding on its preferred option for that period through to 2027, 2029. Part of the reason for that is that it's in December that the Chief Executive has directed that staff are going to report back on the long-term solution. And when you know what your decision is on the long-term solution, that will be relevant to your decision on the short-term, and by short-term I mean through to the implementation of the long-term, what the short-term solution is. If you're making a decision on your preferred option in December, that if it involves significant expense or a change to levels of service, that will still require a further decision in the long-term plan before it can be implemented. But there might be an opportunity, if this is your preference in December, to implement a partial change from February of next year. And that's because, as I said before, Cape Valley Landfill and some composters in the North Island are able to accept some of the council's kerbside organics if it is your decision to use those options in the meantime. So in terms of those three options that you'll be engaging with the community on, the implementation time frame for them, the first one, if it's composting somewhere else, as I said, possibly getting some of the waste disposed of elsewhere from February of next year. But it will take some time for any alternative composter to get their resource consents lined up. So optimistically, we're saying early 2025 might be possible for that. Obviously, I've got no idea if there are some composters out there that haven't identified themselves to us yet who might be able to do it quicker. That would hopefully become apparent within the next couple of months while the council's engaging with the community if it is possible. Option 2 would be sending, if this is the council's preferred option in December, sending it all to Cape Valley. And as I said, Cape Valley might be able to accept part of that from February of next year if it's still within its truck movement resource consent limits. There would need to be a council decision on the long-term plan in July before the council could finally confirm that decision to send it all to Cape Valley. Option 3, continued operation at the current site. If that was to be the council's preference in its decision making in December of this year. If the preference was that the operator use a second screen, that can be done fairly quickly. That would take about 5 to 6 months on their predictions. If the decision was that there be a reduced quantity processed at that site, then that will take longer to implement. It will need a long-term plan decision, and it will take longer to identify who's going to take the rest of the kerbside organics. And again, if it was to be partial processing at the current site, there are resource consent issues for whoever's going to take the second stage of that composting problem, and the resource consent that they'll need after the council's identified that as a option. Just before I finish and we'll answer any questions, there was one point that was emphasised by some of the deputations this morning, quite understandably, that they want the council to make a decision today to close the plant. The reasons why the staff recommendation to you is that you can't do that today I've highlighted most of them in the summary that I've just given. The first one is because you need to make decisions in accordance with the Local Government Act, and it's our advice to you that it wouldn't be in accordance with the Local Government Act to make a decision without knowing what mana whenua and the community think. Secondly, because if you close the plant today, you need to do something with the city's curbside organics. And I've highlighted that there's no perfect solution yet for what we do with those curbside organics. There are some sites in the North Island that can take some of it at significant costs, financial and environmental. But also that Kate Valley can take some of it, a small portion of it, under its current resource consent limits. But if there was to be diversion of a portion of the waste from the organics processing plant now, that is, in short summary, it's a cost without a benefit. And the reason I say that is that the problem that's causing the offensive and objectionable odour on occasion beyond the boundary of the site is outdoor storage. And diversion of a part of the curbside organics to Kate Valley within their current limits of their resource consent isn't going to end the outdoor storage at the site. So the problem won't go away. Thank you.
All done?
All done.
Right. Thank you. I want to thank staff very much for that and all the work that's been going on in here, out there, and for months. Okay. Now, I'm going to move the Mayor's recommendation, which incorporates the staff's recommendation with some amendments. Pauline is happy to second this. The key points are, as Brent has said, Rec 1 sets out our previous resolution and notes the smell has still continued. Number 2, confirms our preference to stop composting on site, but notes we will decide once the engagement is complete, consultation. 3, sets out the options for the interim solution between now and the new facility opening, including current changes to current operation, sending to other composters, sending to landfill. Number 4, confirms that we will decide when the interim option, confirms that we will decide on when the interim option we can do as soon as practical once the engagement is done. Number 5, asks for a staff report on revoking the previous resolution, immediate things we can do to change, including stopping compost going around the wastewater treatment ponds, which is certainly not helping, anything that can be done to change immediately on site the stop of the smell, and options, the one I like, the options to provide any relief to households that are affected. I know that Yanni has some amendments, which Pauline and I are happy to have put into our resolution or our amendment. But Yanni, would you just like to talk on these, your amendments, please?
Yeah, I thought you were just going to add them to the main
Yes.
one, and then we were just going to debate together.
You might
So,
want to do 6 and 7.
He just wants to do it in a debate.
He wants
6
to do
and
it in a
7.
debate.
I mean, I'm happy to introduce it, but effectively what it does is it reinforces the stories and the deputations and the community views that we've heard repeatedly over the 14 years to be incorporated into any consultation and engagement that we do, so that at the very forefront of this discussion is the impact on the local people in regards to the well-being of their community. So I hope people will support these, but I think in light of what we've heard, not just today, but as you've heard, repeated deputations to council around the significance of this issue impacting on people's well-being and health, that it's important that we make sure that it's very, very clear that we acknowledge that, and that we actually make sure that in the engagement, those views are put to the fore.
Thank you, Yanni. They're good amendments. Pauline, first question. You don't have a question there?
Addressed what was my question? which
Yes,
was going
about
to
being
be-
able to shut it immediately.
Yeah.
Righto. Then we had Kelly and then Aaron.
Yeah, no, that was my question too. Why couldn't we shut it immediately? And that's been made clear
Okay.
brilliantly by Brent. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron?
Yeah, I've got 5 really important questions, if I may, and I'll start the first one with why do we have, and if the answers could be kind of short, just because obviously there's a long version as well that probably takes a university degree to get, but why do we have an RMA and why do we have consents? That's my first question. I mean, I grew up in Bromley, so I need really simple answers.
Why do we have an RMA? To manage the sustainable management of natural and physical resources in a way that meets the social and environmental and economic well-beings and cultural well-beings of the community.
Brilliant. And I thought that would be your answer. So a consent's there to protect the environment and the people around it, essentially.
A consent is there to authorise activity to happen within limits that achieve the objective of the RMA.
Okay, cool, thank you. Then what happens, and Christchurch is used to disasters, what happens in a disaster, like if that plant burnt down tonight, was hit by a tsunami tomorrow, was dropped by an earthquake next week, what happens to that organics plant?
Well, using the example of the Christchurch earthquakes, central government makes new law to manage environmental outcomes during that period.
Right, okay. So then my next one is the Cape Valley. Is the Cape Valley issue a capacity issue or purely a consent issue?
Consent.
So it's the consent. So what happens if the Cape Valley consent is breached for truck movements? Because the people of Bromley would ask, why is it okay to breach the odour in Bromley under a consent when you can't breach the truck movements at Cape Valley? Is the answer I'm looking for to that.
That is the answer you're looking for?
No, to that question.
Can you ask the
So
question again?
the people of Bromley would like to know, why can we not breach truck movement consents at Cape Valley, but we can breach the air-conditioned consents that them and their children have to breathe in Bromley?
Because this council doesn't hold any consents for Cape Valley. The consents are held by the operator of Cape Valley, and those consents are issued by the Hiranui District Council. So in order to dispose of kerbside organics at Cape Valley, the current operator needs to decide whether they want to breach their resource consent or whether they would prefer to act lawfully.
Right. Okay. That is a good answer, because it's good to know who's in charge of what. And what about, don't we have an obligation under health and safety to protect the people in our neighbourhood? Like if we're doing an activity which puts them at mental and physical harm to their health, where is our obligation, and how can we continue to do that if we know that we are doing that?
It's precisely because of this council's concerns with that this council has decided to relocate to another site. And it's also precisely because of those concerns that this council asks staff to provide this report to you on ways to relocate sooner.
Right, but normally the way health and safety legislation is used is that once you identify a risk, you deal with it immediately, like building site, find a smidgen of asbestos, close it down until it's removed, and removed by professionals. But in this case, and I know it's not asbestos, but in this case, why do we not stop the activity when we know we are breaching?
Well, we are breaching obligations under the Resource Management Act. I've seen no investigation of whether the council is breaching any health and safety obligations. So if you want advice from staff on that, I suggest you ask for it and staff can report back to you on it.
So then finally, given that we've been told of these claims for years now, have we looked into that, and if not, why not?
My expectation is that the council has, but I can answer that at our next report or
That
next
would be good,
briefing
and if
you
we
would
could
like.
make that public, would be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Good answers. Mark.
Well, my questioning was really well handled by Aaron, and really I'd just like to confirm there is no physical way we can close that plant tomorrow.
Correct.
Okay. We heard in the deputations of a gentleman that was offering a solution. Why have we not managed to engage with them prior to him coming to talk to us today?
That will take a little bit more work to find out what he has been saying to the council and when he has. I don't know whether you've got to the bottom of that, Mary.
I had a quick conversation with the gentleman. He had engaged with us over WTP and had met with the officer in charge about that, and subsequently he has sent in Lagoima requests to the Lagoima team and has got the information back. We have now got his contact detail. Megan got that for us, and we will be engaging with him. But he had not engaged, to our knowledge, about this, and to his advice before now.
Right. Mark, you're done?
And I've got sort of one last thing, because I did notice in the report there was a mention of Pound Road as one of the possible alternate sites.
That's got nothing to do with what we're doing.
Well, I need to ask on behalf of my community to make sure that we've got no risk out there.
Okay, go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the alternative solutions to take some of the compost is a local composter, commercial composter from Canterbury, expanding their operation and opening a new site. At this stage, Pound Road is an indicative location. Nothing yet has been confirmed and no ground has been broken. So it's just an indication for our planning purposes at this stage.
Because I would hate us to move this to a site that will affect any other residents anywhere.
Yes, and we have taken that into consideration with all the options we've looked at.
Thank you listen, look at that. It's no more questions. So we'll go into debate. Oh, yeah.
Good try. I just wondered, in terms of our assessment of the policies, we seem to be quite silent on our strengthening communities strategy and also our resilient greater Christchurch strategy. And in both of those strategies is reference to people's wellbeing. So again, like just to pick up on, you've kind of listed the reasons why in terms of things like the waste minimisation strategy, climate change strategy, but you haven't really talked much about the other policies that look after people's wellbeing at a local level. Are we able to do that for the consultation so that it's really clear that there's other policies and strategies that we have as a council that support the call that the community is making around how they're impacted?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We'll do that.
Yeah, I think it could have been a faux pas on our behalf, but we didn't necessarily look at these other policies to be included in this particular report because that's where these reports originated from, was addressing the wellbeing concerns. So for anything further, that those policies will be included.
I guess the question comes down to, and it's a bit like some of the questions that Councillor Kieran has raised, is how is it that we have a risk of breaching some policies but not others with the decisions that we make to address the issue for the community?
Yeah, so the policies that you're talking about will be referred to, I'm sure, in the engagement document that will be coming back to you.
Right.
So have a close look at the draft of that when it comes back.
Okay. Is there? Do you have a sense of, over the history of the plant, the number of complaints that we've received and the number of non-compliances in total?
I haven't got any numbers.
We can't give them to you today, but
Right.
We do keep a record of them. Majority of the complaints that come through go through ECAN, and we get a monthly summary of the concerns that have been lodged to ECAN for the past month. And we collate those, so we can get those to you if you wish.
Okay.
Because I guess
Yeah, I'd like to get into debate if I can, but carry on.
Okay.
I only got my...
So I think, again, just in terms of the information that when it goes out, if there could be some context to the number of times that people have had to complain, and I know ECAN records incidences rather than complaints, but actually showing the scale of the issue over the 14 years, I think is really important when people go to make submissions. So is there a way that we can highlight the number of complaints that have been received, again, in that consultation, if that's what we decide to do?
We're not the part of the council who draft the engagement document, but we'll pass this message on to them and they'll have a draft coming back to you for your approval.
Just two other questions. One is, in terms of the abatement notice, where are we at with ECAN? Because my understanding is, obviously, we had an adaptive management plan that failed. ECAN served us a notice.
Yeah, we're addressing all that, and we're looking to go forward. What's happened in the past is bad, but we want to get.
But looking forward, my understanding from the liaison group meeting that we had, which is publicly minuted, that ECAN have said they will do an independent review of the consent around the plant being able to operate and being non-compliant, and also the conditions. So have we had any communication from ECAN around that review and a likely time frame for it?
I don't know about a time frame for it. I understand that the review is underway.
Okay, all good. So we've finished with questions. Now we're into debate. Woo-hoo. Who would like to go first? Mark, Mark.
Thank you. I'd like to personally apologise to the residents of Bromley and the east of Christchurch. I've heard your pleas this morning and wholeheartedly empathise with the horrific situation you find yourselves in. To be forced to tolerate this problem as long as you have is simply not acceptable. I'm extremely frustrated that we are even here having to deal with this again today. Sadly, I feel the previous council failed in their obligations to act as they should have closed the OPP last year. We have known about these problems with odour ruining the lives of the neighbours in the Bromley and East Christchurch area for far too long. Whilst I understand that we as a council must follow through the processes involved in resolving this, and it's good to see that we will be after today, hopefully, my strong preference would be to close this OPP immediately and do the right thing by the residents who have suffered for far too long. I wish there was a way we could be seen to be a big and bold council and close this as of now. I would urge us as a council to do all that we can, knock on every door we need to, in order to get this OPP closed as soon as physically possible, and a replacement option in place to meet our obligations to handle this green and food waste as soon as possible. If that means we need to work with government and any other agencies or persons or parties to get this done, we simply must. The limitations we bind ourselves up with in this country through red tape really need to be overcome, and we need to find ways to get the right things done rather than simply settling for the excuses we can't. We need to get back to the can-do attitude that Canterbury has been famous for over history. As we heard the deputation today, enough indeed is enough, and this has to stop, if not immediately, then absolutely as soon as humanly possible. It is time for us as a council to be the good neighbour and do the right thing by our communities.
Thank you. Pauline.
Thank you, and I concur with Councillor Peters' comments, particularly as soon as possible, and I think that has to be the mantra for today. And I do hope that the residents can take some hope out of these resolutions today. That has been a huge amount of work arriving to these, and we've had, I don't know how many iterations of them actually, but I feel that we've got into a pretty good place. And particularly I have to refer to number 5, where we are seeking a report, and we have to have a report to make a decision to revoke the decision in the Finance and Performance Committee meeting, which for me was actually a perverse outcome. We were actually agreeing to allow staff to pursue further improvements, and as a consequence of that, the plant had to remain open, rather than actually consciously saying we want to keep it open. We've never wanted to keep it open. Now, we've been aware of this for a long, long time, but it's been one of the most challenging problems that I've faced. I too am sorry that all the various changes and improvements have not solved the objectionable odour problem. And I also am sorry that we can't close it today, and we've heard the reasons for that. But I assure the community of affected residents that this council is committed to solving this as soon as possible, ASAP, and that we've noted here that we prefer to end the activity at the site. I'm also sorry that the wheels turn slowly at local government because we're bound by strict processes, including consulting the whole city. However, we are, and I am, promising to get these changes through as soon as possible and the activity to close as soon as possible. Look, I also want to thank staff for the incredible amount of work bringing all those options through, the long list right down to the short list, all that will help to reduce the odour in the short term and the long term. But the reason we can't close it now too, we know that we need to find somewhere to take it. And it's a real challenge. But again, we will commit to doing that as soon as possible. And in the meantime, we'll be working hard to actually find ways to reduce the volume going there. I think that's the key. And staff will work with the operator on optimal operation. We'll continue to do that, in my view, without investing any more money in it. I repeat, though, that this council is committed to ending this activity in Bromley and to finding relief for the residents who've made it clear to us that they are suffering, and we will do this as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, it may seem very simple to a lot of us what to do here, but in fact, I think the whole council has come to realise over the last few months just how complex this issue is. On one level, we want to respond with our hearts, and we want to fix the problem for the people who have come out and so articulately explained what they've been through in their lives. But we have to respond with our heads, and I think we've tried to do that. I really want to commend staff on the excellent work that they've done in answering all our questions and giving us so many different options to look at. But at the end of the day, we really need to do the right thing for the people and to close this as soon as possible. I'm proud to be part of this council, which is actually going to address this issue and finish it off, which has been festering in our city for so long. So, yeah.
Thank you. So it's for me to say to Aaron, have debate.
Yeah, I'm not sure where to start here, but I might start with the Mark Peters question about is it coming to Hornby, because we don't want it there. The not in my backyard principle probably applies to most councillors here, except for this one, because I have the biggest backyard that's flat. Tyrone has the biggest backyard, but it's not flat. There's hundreds of acres in Harewood of unproductive, mostly unused land, and a lot of it owned by ECAN and others. There are many alternatives to do this. A temporary composting plant that's not within cooey of anyone would not be that hard to do. This is a can't-do council sometimes, and Christchurch once was famous for being a can-do city. Looking post-rebuild, we are a bit of a can't-do city. The amount of time it's taken for us to solve problems and get things going sometimes is appalling. So I will, in this case, stand up for the people of Bromley. I will say we should be shutting this today. Christchurch, as a city, has been shitting in Bromley's backyard, literally, since before I was born. The sewer farm's there, the composting plant's there. They put up with the smell. The smell's unacceptable. It's a smell I know well because I have two businesses in the area and I stop often at the Celtic station on Dyers Road, and you can smell it most days, and the smell is untenable. I ask all of you if you would go and live next to that plant with your children, because I look you all in the eye and I guarantee the answer is no. I dare one of you to put your hand up now and say you'll live next to it, because I'll tell you what, I'll pay your first month's rent. We'll rent you a place and you go there with your kids and you do it. These people come in here and they shed tears to this council, and we say it can't be done because of the Resource Management Act that we are happy to breach most days. Yes, we get the reported breaches, but there are breaches beyond that most days. Do not do this to these people. Find a solution, and God help this country if we ever go to war, because I think we'll just sit back and take it.
Right.
Be a load of rubbish if you want, but it is what we dump in their backyard, a load of rubbish every day.
Okay. So, yeah, Yanni, debate.
Thank you. I think it's a shame as a council we no longer stand up when we debate, but I think there's times when it is actually important to stand up, and today is one of those. I just want to start, at the start of our council meeting, we acknowledge the importance of volunteers. I want to acknowledge every single person in this community who has volunteered, given up countless hours of their time over a decade of coming to council, raising concerns to the elected members, to council staff, and to liaise with other people in the community to stand up for their well-being. The reality is that this decision to put the organics plant here in 2007 was the wrong one. I was on the council at the time that we made that vote, and I abstained because I was concerned about the lack of information in the report to give us a good option. We had two choices back then that were delegated to staff. One was to put it where it is today, and the other was to put it in a forest away from residential. And I have no understanding of why the tender and the evaluation came back to put it where it was, which is in the wrong location, on the coast with a prevailing wind that makes the residential area suffer. This was in 2007. We have repeatedly had votes around this table to do the right thing by the community, and last year we had a vote to close it immediately that was lost, and now we're back here a year later with the same issues. The point that my council colleague makes is absolutely right. For every time that there's a notice of non-compliance or ECAN go and investigate, there are literally thousands of complaints that have been made and thousands of incidents that have occurred in this community that have never been reported, never been acted on, and never being faced the consequence of a breach of a consent. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen, it does. And now the evidence is overwhelming. Even our own odour scouts have highlighted to us that there are many times where this is offensive and objectionable beyond the boundary in breach of its consent. So I welcome the information that we're getting today, but the time has come to take action. And I acknowledge the resolutions that we've got in front of us are a lot better than the ones that I think we had at the start of the day, which the resolutions here give us a time frame to get things back to the 2nd of August meeting where we can make some decisions, which I think we absolutely need to make. I just want to conclude with saying that this is not just a Bromley issue. This impacts on people in Bromley, but it also impacts on people in many other parts of our city. It impacts on people in Woolston, it impacts on people in Linwood, it impacts on people in Phillipstown, it impacts on people in Aranui, it impacts on people in South New Brighton. There'll be other communities that are also impacted by it. This council needs to start to address the environmental inequity that exists in the east of this city. For far too long it has gone on, and we have allowed it to happen rather than address it. Today we start to address it, and I support the resolutions that are put up.
Sam.
Oh yeah, look, just very briefly, I just wanted to, again, obviously acknowledge the significant impact this has on a local community, but I think, this has been a really highly emotive issue, but actually wanted to call out the fact that we have a way forward, and I think that's really important when there is a community suffering, that at the same time we can acknowledge that as a council, and I know through the leadership of Phil and Pauline, how committed they are to resolving this issue. I'm just really pleased that we've got to a point today where we can work as a united council to move this forward. We will get to the end of the year, in my view, and have an outcome that works for everybody. I think the challenges that have been presented as we've gone through the questions and even the debate, Mark mentioned the fact that they don't want it on Pound Road. That quantifies the significant challenges we have with this. So we have to do it once and we have to do it right. So I guess as much as, again, expressing frustration, I think we should also reflect on the fact we have a way forward. We will consult the community and make a decision that works for everybody. But again, acknowledging and reassuring the people of Bromley and again the wider community, having known how many hours both the Mayor and Deputy Mayor have spent on this issue and continue to, this won't go away without a resolution. So I think we're as close as we've ever been to getting to a point where there is a long-term solution that our council can be proud of. And so we shouldn't lose sight of that today, that we are doing the right thing by the community, getting a decent outcome, and doing it in a way that can't slow down this process and for the years to come. Because that's the stark reality. If we reacted or overreacted today, we would be in a position where we are inflicting more harm and more suffering onto that community. So I just want to acknowledge my colleagues for taking a considered and sensible approach to this, and again reassuring the community that the Mayor and Deputy Mayor are working and certainly questioning the staff daily on this to get to a point that we will be proud of as a city.
Thank you. Andre.
Thank you very much. For a number of years I worked in an office which was 3 kilometres away from this plant, and often the smell was so bad just to walk outside from 3 kilometres away. I can barely understand what it's like to live just several hundred metres. I honestly can barely begin to understand. I can't understand how residents were gaslit for so many years to tell them the stink wasn't coming from there. Everyone's green bin at home stinks, so it's not rocket science to figure out that a city's worth of green bins will also stink. One of the big considerations we have going forward and what we do is the environmental impacts. we've been destroying an environment for 14 years in Bromley. The environment is, as the definition is, the surroundings or conditions in which a person, animal, or plant lives or operates. But that environmental consideration doesn't seem to be in consideration for many years. It seems like now it is. So when we look at environmental considerations, that has to be one of them. We are actively destroying an environment where people live in right now. So I support getting it gone as soon as we can.
Thank you. So no more debate. I will wrap it up. Right. I do not support keeping the OPP open 1 second longer than is necessary. We are, however, in strife. All the work we've done over the last few years has not worked as well, or at all, in some people's minds, as we thought. This resolution is the first step in giving us permission to reduce the volume by taking it to other places. It also sets the ball in motion to stop compost being spread at the wastewater treatment plant, which is certainly not helping the situation. Because the OPP does all of the city's green bin waste, we have to consult. The Deputy Mayor and I have worked hard to get this consultation underway as soon as possible. Once the consultation is done, we will be able to instantly do one of the three things. Continue it, which won't go down at all, or take some or all to other composters, or take some of all to landfill. There's a couple of other things I wanted to say. One of the other things is that we need to use that 18,000 tonne that Cape Valley has got up its sleeve as fast as we can, because there's a gap there and we can use it. They haven't got the consents to take it all, but I feel that if we put less into the OPP as soon as we can, it'll take the pressure off an overworked machine. So it's all got to help. We put less in, it's got to help the situation. I don't really want to see council spend another cent down at Bromley at the OPP, because it's just throwing good money after bad. Instead of spending it down there, I'd rather spend it on dump fees taking it away. I did go down and see, Vicky Walker has been in touch with me off and on for a number of years, and I went down and saw it. She rung up and she said, "Oh, it smells." So I shot down there and she said, "You just missed it. The wind's changed." Now, it can change like that. I've talked to the others. It can be bad there. She said, "We had the wastewater treatment plant this morning, but then we had the OPP. And right now we've got nothing. But if you come back in an hour, it could well all be back." So these, and occasionally some of us may drive down there one day, wind our window down and say, "Oh, it doesn't smell. What are these people prattling on about?" And it is bad. Okay, we've heard today it is bad. So what have we got? So in my view, the other thing that they've had to put up with is sadly the fire from the wastewater treatment plant. But that's working through. We're working on our insurance for that, and that will pop out. I think by the end of the year we'll know what's happening there with a bit of luck. In my view, as Councillor Peters said, this is definitely a case of enough is definitely enough in this case. But we are moving forward, and we are going to get this sorted. Thank you very much. And with that, I will put this motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? You want that recorded, Aaron? Yep, thank you. And Mark, Aaron and Mark recorded now. Who abstained? Okay. So we've been there. I say that is carried. Thank you very much for all your attendance. Thank you. Right, so we will move on to item 6.